Hello and welcome to Newspeak, our weekly look at the news agenda. This week, as usual, I'm joined by Amy Gallagher, the campaigner behind Stand Up to Woke, and actually also who's involved in an NHS legal battle at the moment. Amy, how's it going?
Yeah, very slow, but it's coming along okay.
Slow but surely.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah.
Right. And Harrison Pitt of This Manor, you would have seen him on Deprogrammed on Thursday, and also from the European Conservative, of course. Harrison, how's it going with the show?
Oh, very well. Yeah, no, we had another good episode. So we're now, obviously, this will be going out on Saturday, but another success this week, and very enjoyable. Good to be on the news set as well.
Challenging the orthodoxies of...
Doing our best, yes.
Yeah, great.
Doing our best.
Well, anyway, this week we're going to be talking obviously about general election, if you can stay awake that long. But before that, I just want to discuss what's happened just very recently in New York, where obviously President Trump has been convicted on 34 charges. Harrison, people are saying that this is, a turning point for America. I mean, would you call it that?
Certainly, yeah. I think it is. Obviously, it's been rumbling for a while, but I think one of the ways in which I would put it is a sort of crossing the Rubicon moment in American politics. Obviously, everyone's known for a while that they're just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks with Trump. In fact, I actually think it would have been much better. Just thinking in purely strategic terms, forget the morality for a second, I think it would have been much more sensible for Democrats just to throw 2 or 3 charges Trump's way, because then at least it would have been convincing, and independent voters might have felt, oh gosh, well maybe he is guilty if it's just 1 or 2 things. But the fact that they've been throwing literally everything that they can possibly pin on him at the wall in a kind of demented fashion really does underscore the brazenness of this attempt to effectively persecute a political opponent, and all the Democrats and all of the left-wing media and all the polite opinion on the East Coast and the West Coast are completely in favour of it. And so it's been a very clarifying moment in that respect. And yes, I do think that America could be described at the moment in the same way that when Caesar crossed the Rubicon, all of a sudden there was a sort of civil war that went on in Rome. It was not quite violent yet, but there is a sort of cold civil war brewing in the United States, and it just got more serious.
Yes, I mean, the point is really about this is that it's been the kind of weaponization, hasn't it, of the justice system against him. That's what it really is. But apparently, the sort of support for him after this is like half and half, isn't that right, Amy?
Yeah, it seems as though it hasn't really changed opinion that much in America. In other words, that people that were supportive of Trump are still supportive of him, and people that hate him still hate him. So there is this divide, and it looks as though the November election will be very narrow in terms of it could only be tens of thousands of votes in it, and it does depend on a few swing states like Pennsylvania and Nevada to whether Trump will win or lose. So it's going to be kind of a real battle to the death up until November of this year. We don't know what's going to happen, and we don't know what his sentence will be. We won't know what his sentence will be until another couple of months. It could be that he's sent to prison, or it could be that he's given community service, or it could be that he's put under house arrest. Although I guess many people are thinking that the fact that the Democrats and the judges and the legal systems have gone to this length to prosecute him is likely to lead, they're likely to want to put him in prison. The judge will want to be the judge that puts him in prison, and that's what everybody's gunning for. So we could have an extraordinary situation where the president of, the potential president of the United States is in prison around the time of the election. So you can always, we think that our sort of campaign and our election is farcical and embarrassing and all sorts of things, but you can always rely on America to provide something far more extravagant and far worse, actually.
Exactly. It's a bit of a circus. Robert De Niro turned up, didn't he? All of this. But the thing is about this, which strikes me, is that, again, it's the institutions, isn't it, of America, which are now basically facing a complete collapse in confidence, isn't it, like our ones? I mean, it's their justice, for goodness sake. This is the thing. And as you say, I don't know quite whether they could actually recover from it. I mean, I don't know whether it's stating it too harshly, but I found that my attitudes to our institutions after Brexit, for example, changed entirely. I no longer think they are really what I always thought they are.
Yes.
Well, and it's the same surely with America and this, isn't it?
Absolutely the same. I think it is the same, and I think as well the conservatives used in a small c sense of this would apply to the Republicans as much as it would to people calling themselves conservatives in this country, precisely because we want to cherish our institutions. Yeah. This is an especially tragic recognition, and it often means that we're much slower in reacting to changes which have actually been long in the making. And I think that's true in the United States as well. There's just this assumption on the part of Republicans that, America's a law-governed country. We have the Constitution. We have separation of powers. We have all of these things which ensure us against all these sort of institutional checks and balances, these institutionalized, procedures which are going to insulate us against anything like this. This only happens in African countries. This only happens in third world countries. But of course, what institutional setup matters, but what matters a great deal more than the institutional setup itself is who's in charge of them, who's in them, what are their agendas, and Republicans, like conservatives in this country, have just been completely caught asleep at the wheel.
But before this verdict comes out, he's actually going to be doing one of these debates, isn't he? Yeah,
he's already putting out campaign videos, and he's so he's putting out, and he's using all of this as material for him being kind of a martyr and him being against the system. So I mean, it does beg a belief that this could be in any way considered to be a fair trial, because how can the jury not have an opinion on Donald Trump already? And it's as Harrison said, I think for a lot of people are feeling like this signals almost an end of Western civilization. I know that sounds dramatic, but the thing that does separate America and the West from the Middle East and places like Pakistan is the rule of law, like an honest and proper rule of law. And if America loses that, and if their politics to descend into kind of corrupt lawfare, each opponent trying to put the other opponent in prison, then it does feel pretty existential in terms of, the future.
Andrew, I suppose that, at least it's making it kind of interesting, unlike R1.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Are you sort of like actually following this election campaign? Well, we are going to talk about it, so I hope you are.
As much as I need to, in order not to be completely incoherent on both Newspeak and Deprogrammed, but other than that, not a great deal more. There's I don't feel the enthusiasm to watch it as I might have done in previous moments. It is incredibly dull, and particularly I'm sort of torn on it, but particularly when we found out that Farage was not going to be running, that made it duller still.
It was sort of slightly odd because, again, there was one of these sort of slightly, not exactly a non-event, but it was meant to be a press conference for reform down in Dover, in which something was going to be announced, or this is going to be really big. But then actually it was just a rehash, actually, of what he said before. But the fact he's so accomplished, putting the message across, Nigel Farage, that, when you look at the others, when I saw this Rishi Sunak scuttling along the platform with his rucksack on, to get on the train on one of these photo things shoots. And I just sort of thought, this is the Prime Minister. He looks like a schoolboy,
Yeah, and he's just done his first ever TikTok video, which he'd looked so pathetic in it, and it was so embarrassing and so cringeworthy. But we've kicked off this campaign with two very cynical, out of nowhere policies from Labour and Conservatives. So the first of those is the Labour Party announcing that they want to extend the vote to 16-year-olds. Obviously this has come up, in the past with the Labour Party, and it's not surprising because it would be 16-year-olds that would mostly vote for Labour. Young people generally vote left, so you can understand why they would want to push it. But it's not a particularly inspiring policy, in a run-up to a campaign. This is not something that young people are pushing for. There's no grassroots campaign for young people to be able to vote. And it seems as though the Labour Party are very confused, or just political parties in general are very confused about what to do about young people. And we can come on to the policy about national service in a minute. But, as it stands, young people have to stay in education or training till 18. They can't drink alcohol till they're 18. They can't get married till they're 18, and yet Labour want to allow them to vote at 16. And there's also cross-party politicians now pushing for a ban on smartphones for young people under the age of 16. They shouldn't be allowed smartphones or be able to access social media. So it must be very confusing for young people at the moment to know, but nobody seems to know where to place them or where to put them, because they're beginning, it's totally conflicting messages around young people and whether they should be infantilized and kept away from things that could damage them and be kept safe, or whether they should be given rights and responsibilities. But I just think this policy from Labour is just completely about getting more votes, essentially.
Yeah, it's sort of, the thing is, it probably will happen, therefore, won't it?
You would expect so. I mean, I don't think they're going to make it a centerpiece of this campaign, because they're already doing so well in the polls, and they're 26 or how many points ahead. It might spook people off a little bit. I mean, because most people, I would imagine, the current electorate, given how it's sort of lopsided demographically, I doubt that many people in the over 50s bracket will want their futures, or even indeed their children's futures, being decided by 16-year-olds going forward. So I don't expect Labour to make it a centrepiece of this campaign, but be in no doubt, and Peter Hitchens is correct to warn us about this, that in the same way that Blair in 1997, the thing that the left understands so much better than the right is that it's much more important to entrench power and to worry about power and acquiring more of it than it is to obsess over political issues. Now, I find political issues very interesting, and I like debating policy and all these sorts of things, but the left realizes that constitutional changes, for example, and this would be a huge constitutional change, there's been no time in British history when the franchise has been extended to a certain new group and then taken away. That just doesn't happen. So once this happened, it would be effectively for keeps. The left plays a long game in this respect, and the right, again, chronically short-termist by comparison. And so yes, I expect given recent history, you'd expect Labour to be politically expedient about it and do what's in their long-term interests.
The thing is about this is that, this was a policy they announced, and then the Tories announced afterwards a national service thing, which we'll talk about in a minute, and therefore, which basically was greeted with fair amount of derision, I think, wasn't it? This is the serious one, and Labour have therefore got away scot-free with very little discussion about it. When I say it will happen, they will pass it almost certainly. And I mean, frankly, I don't know. Did you at 16 want to vote?
I probably did, but yes,
yeah.
I wouldn't.
I mean, did you?
No, I didn't know. No,
I wasn't even thinking about it then.
No, and also I think if you're in education when you're 16, and you wouldn't want kind of all that outside influence coming in, peer pressure, and having to talk about how you voted. I don't think it's a good idea at all.
Yes, I think it's an appalling idea. But in fact, the most recent poll, I think showed voting intentions would be therefore over 18 or whatever. 59% young people for Labour, 8% for the Tories, and the Greens came above the Tories, about 9% or something. And that's not just because they're thinking, oh well, let the others have a chance. It's not that. No, it's because they are more left wing, and they are staying left wing. They're not sort of like this whole thing of, if you're a Tory when you're young, you've got no heart, but if you're still one, you've got no head. They're not. They're staying the same. It's
very much so, and it's because when it's one of those things. I don't actually know if Churchill said that, but it's one of those quotes that's been ascribed to Churchill. If you don't vote left when you're young, you have no heart. If you don't vote right when you're old, you have no brain. But that was true at a time when, and this is what the New Culture Reform's all about, in fact. When policy debates were primarily focused around economics, that probably did hold true, because all of a sudden you're on the tax rolls, and all of a sudden you have a mortgage, you've got to pay national insurance, but you've got a family. All of a sudden it makes sense to, well, actually no, I was a sort of raging, I really liked the idea of aping Keir Hardie and the Labour tradition in my youth, but now that I've got a home, I believe in Thatcherite property owning democracy. So that shift naturally happens under those circumstances. But because today so much more of our debates revolve around cultural matters, and that's why I say this is what the New Culture Reform's trying to foreground, it means that doesn't necessarily hold true anymore, because if you've got young people who are genuinely being inducted into a kind of new way of thinking in almost pseudo-religious terms, signing up to kind of woke orthodoxies, there's no reason why any economic conditions improving would cause you to relinquish those opinions. And so we're not seeing that pattern develop anymore.
Did you think that basically it was a mistake, Amy, to then go and sort of like announce this national service?
Well, yeah, I mean, like you said, it's a good point. Actually, I never thought it does take the attention away from Labour
no one's talking
policies.
about it anymore.
Yeah, so they've sort of got away with it in a sense.
Yeah.
But I think that, I mean, this national service, for me, it came completely out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting it, and I know people in the Tory party who said it came out of nowhere. They weren't seeing it. I mean, I think to try and give it a good spin, if possible, I think some of the kind of ethos behind it, i.e. kind of patriotism or wanting young people to feel connected to the community or be given a sense of duty, is kind of right. But the policy just does not fit with that at all. It just does not make sense. I mean, as soon as they announced it, they almost started rolling it back immediately, because people were asking, well, how will it be mandatory? And they said, oh, it actually won't be mandatory. It's you can do it voluntary, and what will be the punishment if someone doesn't do it? Oh, there won't be any punishment. So actually, they tried to do something bold, but they just couldn't, like the Tories, they just couldn't follow it through. Within 24 hours, they're trying to change their own policy that they've just announced. It's kind of farcical.
Embarrassed by it.
Yeah. And what it actually amounts to is that they are saying that they want, a small group of 18-year-olds to do a kind of 12-month military placement, but actually the majority of 18-year-olds won't be doing that. And the majority of 18-year-olds will be doing a kind of once monthly effectively a community service. So essentially they're being asked to work one weekend a month and not get paid, which just does not seem to make sense. There's no incentive for young people to want to do that.
So wait a minute, one weekend, so like 2 days?
Yeah, 2 days out of every month.
25 days a year?
Yeah, so they'll do some kind, like an extended work experience, which is what a lot of young people do. They do a lot of internships and work experience. And actually the problem at the moment is that young people can't get jobs. They want to get a job and they want to get paid, and they want to get out on the housing ladder. So it feels to me, I actually wonder if this policy has come out of a weird sense of guilt from our political elite, that it is young people that are inheriting a complete mess. They can't get on the housing ladder, the education system's messed up. They have to spend a fortune on degrees, and the degrees aren't worth the paper they're written on. It's, that the culture is changing in such a dramatic way that it no longer feels like a home anymore. So the Tories' response to that was to make them do work for free, once a month. It's actually what criminals get given is community service. I mean, Trump may well have to do community service. So it seems bizarre.
I think it's also, I think you've done about as good a job as one could do of trying to redeem this policy. Not that you were towards the end, but in the beginning. The most instructive comment I saw on it was by Mary Harrington, who commented on Twitter saying, you can't dismantle the nation and then say you're in favour of national service. Look at the way in which Rishi Sunak talks about what Britain is. If you say, oh, Britain, we're a sort of multicultural, tolerant, values-based democracy, it's all completely anodyne. There's no sense of belonging, really. I mean, because that description could as easily describe Finland as it could describe Britain. There's nothing particularly British about it. There's no sort of husbandry over our heritage. There's no principle of national preference, which makes us very hesitant about giving citizenship to incomers. We give it out willy-nilly. We devalue the meaning of citizenship all the time, which is why we have these marches in London every single Saturday of basically tribalistic foreigners with British passports militating in favour of their own little ethnic hobby horse. As Farage puts it, the Labour Party opened the doors, the Tory Party accelerated it. That's what's been happening over the last 14 years. And so at the last minute to come out and say, oh yeah, actually we believe at an abstract level in patriotism, and our way of demonstrating that is to wheel out this most impotent, most symbolic of policies. It really does take the biscuit.
I think it's something like 30,000 young people could have military places, and they'd be paid for that. So apparently, as you say, the rest of it, which I think people would be put in with the police or the ambulance services, things like that. it does sound like the sort of thing we used to do at school to get out of games. You know, we used to have to go and see a few old biddies,
Yeah.
you know, and sit there and drink tea and have biscuits and everything. Quite nice, actually. But I mean, essentially, it was not onerous. I mean, it seems to me that quite seriously, you've got to have a strong element of compulsion, and it should all be military. But women as well, young girls also are going to be, aren't they, 18-year-old girls. Before, it was always just men.
Oh yes, of course, yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. I didn't realise that. Yeah, it would be everybody. So I mean, and the sort of things they would be doing, well, Rishi said, would be kind of dropping off prescriptions and helping in the community. So it sounds like low-skilled jobs for no pay, essentially. And I don't necessarily know what young people would learn from that, because actually that doesn't reflect the real world, because in the real world you would expect to get paid, and you would be, you know, you would be held to the standards of an employee, which it seems like you wouldn't be doing on this course. So I don't really know what people would necessarily gain from it, but I do know that it would cost the government a lot of money to put into action and put into place. So it doesn't even seem like it's a way of saving or making money, but really what young people need is kind of help, you know, getting jobs and getting skills and you know,
buying houses,
or
renting even.
Really the big policy announcement should have been, and it's almost like they sort of, I wonder if there's, you know, there's underneath this a desire to come out with a huge policy announcement about immigration. That would be the thing that everybody would sit up and go, gosh. And you know what, if the Tories came out with a real serious policy about immigration, they probably turn this election round in the next 6 weeks. If they actually said, we're going to be really serious, you know, we've messed up, but we are going to do something dramatically serious about mass immigration, that would be the thing that would catch people's attention. And that would be the thing that, because it is mass immigration that is destroying the sense of community and patriotism and all the things that this conscription policy speaks to, but they can't talk about immigration because they're fouled on it. So they come out with this weird policy about, you know, about military service.
The thing is, you see, we'll talk about immigration actually, but the thing about this particular policy is that, first of all, the army itself has never been keen on this idea, all sorts of reasons. It's not new. Cameron came up with it, something to do with national service. But even in 2010, I guess, something like that, the situation even then was not quite as dire as it is now on this front. You're quite right, everything comes back to migration. But I remember, one of the great arguments for the national service was that, in fact, people who would never otherwise meet someone from another social class, for example, did, and it kind of acted as a binding on society, you know. And enormous. I remember it was very, very strong in my father's reminiscences, you know, national service, and he was a paratrooper. You know, and it really sort of meant something. Met a huge number of different people and everything. But this seems to me to be very milquetoast.
Well, yet, I mean, it's almost like they've shown up to an earthquake with a dustpan and brush,
yes,
and they have engineered the earthquake.
Yes.
And so when you're talking about the way, the reason why your father and people of that generation would have been able to talk about national service in glowing terms was because they lived in an atmosphere and an environment where every single social value just ticked that, and it almost wouldn't necessarily have noticed it. I actually expect that if you asked a British person in 1914, what does it mean to be British? They would have been really puzzled, because they would have thought, well, why do I need to define it? I'm just living it. It's precisely because we've deconstructed it today that we are constantly trying to define it in terms of this bullet point, this is what it means to be British. And so given that our political class has been relentlessly deconstructing and repudiating that world, which made concepts like national service make sense, that's precisely why just saying the words don't magic anything into being, and it just rings really, really hollow, really, really desperate. And I expect it's also partly an attempt, they realise that they're doing very badly with young people already, to try and entrench the vote in older generations as well. I think that's also what they're trying to do.
I think, you know, you're quite right. This has got the feeling of something done on the fly, and essentially it's not going to be, unlike the other one, it's really not going to be enacted. And I mean, even if the Tories were sort of in pole position to win, bet you it still wouldn't sort of come in. But just out of interest, if you can sort of cast your mind, would you have done it? If supposing national service has still been around when you were, 18, because it was 1960 it stopped. But would you have done it?
So I would have been, and you have to be, it kicks in when you're 18?
Sorry?
It kicks in when you're 18. Yeah. So I would have been 20, it would have been 2016. Yeah, I think I probably would have done it then. I mean, if it had been compulsory, all my friends had been doing it.
What I mean is, would you have been horrified by this?
I probably would have been a little bit miffed, yes, but maybe I would have got into the spirit of things. I mean, I used to enjoy, there's just like Amy's saying, a lot of young people do these sorts of things anyway, don't they? I mean, you know, partly because it will look really good on your CV, so make sure that you do the Duke of Edinburgh because no one else does that. Oh wait, everyone does that, so that's rather devalues it. But people do these sorts of things, and so yeah, I think I would have had the right, I'd like to think I would have had the right spirit about things, yeah.
I can't help thinking of it in terms of being military. That's why I'm asking.
I definitely would have done that.
You would have done that?
Yeah,
would you have done?
No, I'd done something military. No, I would have. I like the idea of helping in the community. That would have appealed to me. I mean, I guess if you feel that everybody's doing it, you don't resent doing it because you feel, well, we're all doing it, and then you may well get things out of it that you may not have expected to. But no, I wouldn't have wanted to be involved in the military. That wouldn't suit me.
No, I think while I have got nothing but admiration for the military, the thought of actually living the life just appalls me. But I mean, but nevertheless, from afar, it's fantastic. You mentioned immigration there. So far, hasn't it been absent unless I have missed something?
Apart from Nigel Farage has been talking about, making a lot of noise about it, but that's all. And he's been repeatedly shut down and by the mainstream media, and everyone turning on him for saying very mild things that a lot of people have also said. But other than that, the two main parties aren't talking about it.
I do think he did in that Trevor Phillips interview, though. I think Farage did. Not for people who watch this, not for people like us who think of ourselves as incredible, so past these. Oh gosh, you can't say that. But I think in the country at large, he did break new ground, so to speak, in that Trevor Phillips interview, because Trevor Phillips was clearly trying to catch him out and saying, "You're talking about Muslims, aren't you?" And then Farage went, "Yeah, I am. Yes." And then he just gave the statistics. He wasn't bigoted about it at all. He didn't say all Muslims, but he just reeled off the kind of alarming statistics that we talk about all the time on these sorts of shows, and the fact that reached a broader audience and on Sky News, and Trevor Phillips, frankly, because he thought Farage would scuttle away from his question, was just completely naked before everything Farage was saying. I think that was a useful tactical moment.
And there was another interview he did where he was being accused of othering, and actually said, "No, you're othering me, you're othering us." People who feel this way are othered all the time, and actually we're not othering Muslims. I mean, he was saying, I'm talking about a small minority of Muslims, and a lot of other moderate Muslims agree with me. I'm not othering anybody, but it is you, the mainstream media, that other people all the time. And I don't think this kind of term of othering I don't think it has the strength that it used to.
No.
Yeah.
It was what I found when he made those remarks, two things. First of all, Trevor Phillips said exactly the same thing, actually in quite harsh terms, only
2017 or something.
Yes, not that long ago. Yeah. And also, he's also said, because he was Trevor Phillips when he was at the Race Equality Commission, he said we were responsible for popularising the term Islamophobia, and boy, do we regret it. I mean, that's essentially what he was saying. And yet he was sort of like turning the tables on. I know he's doing a job, but even so, it's kind of galling. But what strikes me about it is that, when you say, to hear Farage saying the things as he did, is sort of like quite a lot for the country at large. It's sort of like a cycle that goes round. These things worse. I remember in 2016 election, or was it 17? There was talk, of a fifth column. Some people were saying that we've got a fifth column in, big to do about that. It was sort of outrageous. And this never seems to get any further than just lapping at the shores of this issue. I mean, to me, these are the issues, are they not? I mean, immigration, basically, when you look at all of the things that they're talking about in this election, and will continue to, essentially they all are related to migration, aren't they?
Yes, they all relate either directly or indirectly to that matter. And I think you're right. I particularly for people again like us who, and I think we're right, but who think of ourselves as very red-pilled on this, and we have been for a while. And it is galling to see the snail's pace at which the public debate goes. But as far as I'm aware, that's the first time I've seen in Farage's case, an honorary president, but effective leader of reform, of a party that is relatively mainstream, being given airtime on Question Time. He has his show on GB News and now on Sky News. It's the first time I would say that I've seen a mainstream political figure speak in those terms rather than a Douglas Murray or a Rafe Heidelman-Coup or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So potentially new ground in that respect, but I don't have too much good news to.
But the thing is, I think there used to be that this week is essentially going to be the week we talk about the National Health Service, or we have yet to have a kind of migration.
No, and we won't because there is a uniparty consensus on it, and what you will get is people like Farage just doing his best to make it, as he and Tice seem to want to do, the immigration election. I wish them the best of luck in that respect. I think it's really crucial as well, given that the Labour are likely to win. We want the message after the election to be the Tories lost, not because they were far right, but because that they were sort of chronically and congenitally wet and pathetic and to the left of Blair. We want that to be the message, and if Farage can eat into the Tory vote and Tice can eat into the Tory vote in those key marginals while hammering home the immigration question, it will make that sort of post-election narrative craft much easier for us.
Do you think, have you been following anything to do with this Starmer thing and the kind of purging of various candidates? Of course, we've had Diane Abbott, who now apparently is going to be standing for Labour.
Oh, she is? Okay.
Yes, it's lit today.
Yes.
Oh, right.
Very recent.
There was this other guy, this total creep.
Lloyd Russell Moyle.
Yes, that's right. Who seemed slightly, it's sort of unhinged.
Yeah, he did.
When he got in, he made that ranting speech. Appalling character. But what do you make of it? I mean, do you think that this is a real? Because apparently there's people saying, I saw, was it Aaron Bastani saying that this shows a level of deceit in Starmer and Labour that is of a new order. That seems a bit
That's a bit much.
That's a bit much.
Drastic,
but it does. What we are seeing is the fracturing of the Labour Party before they've even got into power, aren't we? Like I think Starmer is a radical, but he's trying to distance himself from the so-called radicals. I think he's kind of Blairite in that respect, in that he presents himself as a centrist. Actually, he describes himself as a socialist. So he's. But I think what we're seeing is a kind of cancel culture that we've obviously talked about for many years happening with the Labour Party, that Diane Abbott and others, this Russell Lloyd, are experiencing themselves. And these are the people that would say, there's no such thing as cancel culture. And now they are being accused of the racism that they have, accused others of for many, many years. That is Diane Abbott's downfall. She's been accused of anti-Semitism. She's been accused of being, racist effectively, that she is not pure enough for the Labour Party. And I agree that she is a racist, to be honest, in lots against Jews and against white people. She's made lots of outrageous comments. But ordinarily that was accepted, but now these kind of people are seen as not pure enough even for the Labour Party. So going forward, I think there's going to be a lot of dissatisfaction amongst the left, particularly amongst the woke left, with the Labour Party. And this is going to be a constant tension.
I was just going to say as well, I think a useful way of thinking about how the left operates is that I actually don't think there's a huge amount at the level of ideology which separates Keir Starmer from someone like Jeremy Corbyn. And likewise in the United States, I really don't think there's much which separates someone like Nancy Pelosi from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The difference is that you have a kind of strategically minded left, which is very well represented by Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer is not going to wear a tie to some royal event in the way that Corbyn will sort of performatively brandish his Republican credentials. I'm not going to wear a tie to that sort of thing. Starmer is much more smooth about it. And so you have the sort of the strategically minded left, which has to pretend to be centrist, has to pretend to be unthreatening. I'm just a man in a suit. You call me Tony, that sort of thing. And then you get the kind of rabid left that can't contain itself, and that's Corbyn and that's AOC. And in many ways, when that left is in the driving seat, it's much more reassuring because you see their moves coming a mile away. People like Starmer are much more sly, and for that reason needs to be watched very carefully, because it clearly is a purge that's underway, and it's the kind of purge which Corbyn probably wouldn't even have had the wherewithal to do in the Labour Party himself. So eyes on Starmer.
But you can't sort of, anyway, can you say, people say, the Labour Party has changed. It's a very superficial view to have. I mean, what about all these members who are still there? They're still there.
Just do a rudimentary test. Do you think that we should, turn on the spending taps. Do you believe in equality, diversity, and inclusion? Do you believe in mass immigration? Has Britain always been multicultural? Just ask them all these questions.
What is a woman?
What is a woman? They will all say the same thing, fundamentally.
Did you see, by the way, winding up now, but did you see that clip with Jez Phillips speaking to the Muslim guys?
Oh, no, Angela Rayner.
I'm sorry, Angela Rayner. Did you see that?
Yeah, it was.
I mean, wasn't that an embarrassment? I mean, but also entirely, it kind of summed it up.
Yeah, and she didn't even. I don't know why she felt the need to do that. I mean, Labour are on course to win. She's going to win. So I don't. You feel like, why are you lowering yourself to that level? But it was Angela Rayner in this very kind of long red dress, surrounded by Muslim men. None of which were making eye contact with her or looking at her. There was no other women in the room, and essentially she was talking to them at length about Palestine, not about any British issues, but just that a ceasefire for Palestine and what Labour's role would be in the conflict in the Middle East. And they didn't seem to be responding to a particularly, in a particularly friendly way. They were just sort of, they weren't sort of like, oh, it's wonderful to hear you talk like this. It looked like she was even being treated with a bit of hostility. And it was remarkable that she felt the need to do that. And it was quite scary to see, actually, that this is the direction that politics are going in, that when you have too much mass migration, democracy just becomes kind of warring tribes, essentially, sectarian tribes, and Labour are all in for it.
I thought it was, when I say embarrassing, it was the blatantness of it. I thought was appalling. No women. I mean, essentially, a completely undiverse room.
Yes,
wasn't it?
And I bet you the sort of white women who write for The Guardian, who went on that sort of crusade against the Garrick Club for only admitting male members, would look at this video and go, what are you talking? There's nothing wrong with this. The men in this room, they're not tribal. They're just morally disinterested humanitarians who care about Gaza. No, Amy's absolutely right about this, and it's quite counterintuitive in some ways, because you might expect, and the naive liberal expectation would be, that the more diversity you have in, say, a constituency, or the more diversity you have in a neighbourhood, the more sort of clashing perspectives you're going to get. It's going to be interesting, it's a bit more jazzy than it used to be. It used to be so boring and conformist, whereas now it's all varied and everyone's debating. In fact, what actually happens in this sort of melting pot is the strongest and most pungent ingredient makes itself known. And in these neighbourhoods, it tends to be political Islam, which is very good at organising as a tribal collective. They don't persist with this myth that we're all just individuals. They act in concert as a tribal collective, and they can get an immense amount done. And it's why people like Angela Rayner feel the responsibility to listen to them. So, and even while it clearly tears her party apart, she still nevertheless talks through both sides of her mouth and will say that diversity is Britain's strength.
Ultimately, though, I mean, we're giving these issues a pretty fair going over, but ultimately, don't you feel that this election, and in fact that matter, most elections that might come along, are sideshows, are they not? I mean, what they engage on and what they talk about, what kind of is the kerfuffle of the day and everything, is sort of a sideshow when you think of quite what we're facing.
Yeah, I think particularly with this Angela Rayner situation, that Nigel Farage has been articulated when people are asking him, well, what are British values? He's saying, well, we do believe that women can be in public spaces, and it's very hard for the mainstream media to disagree with him on that. And what you see is that they often just move on to the next point. They don't pick it up. They don't say, yeah, you're right, actually, that is pretty outrageous. They won't agree with him. But, it's a huge issue that only, a few people are raising. It's like, you do feel, can they see it or can they not see it? Or do they see it but they don't care? I don't know.
Yeah.
I also think as well, with respect to what even is this election, what's going on, I don't think that anything in positive terms is going to be achieved in 2024 for us. I think that Labour's likely to win, and I think that the main mission of the right should be to look past this election a bit and realise that, and to be focusing in a long-termist fashion. I was just saying the left are very long-term on 2029 and beyond, because I think that's when things are really potentially going to get good, but they will not get good this year, sadly.
No, I think at the NCF here, And amongst, you know, sort of like in these waters,
Indeed.
people are trying to do that, aren't they? Look, you know, well, it's the crucial time is going to be after the election.
Indeed.
But anyway, we've still got a month to go, haven't we? So
Exciting.
thank you very much, Amy. Thank you so much, Harrison.
Thank you, Peter.
It was great. I hope I haven't depressed you too much. But anyway, see you again next week. But in the meantime, do have a lovely week, won't you? Okay, take care. Bye. Hello. If you're enjoying the New Culture Forum channel and you believe in our mission, may I invite you to join our membership scheme at the link below or on our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Our work is more important now than ever, and we have great plans ahead for the future, but we can't do it without your support. From as little as £3 per month, you can help ensure that we continue on our mission. As a member, you'll receive a range of benefits, including access to exclusive content, invitations to our private events, including here at our studios, free copies of our books, and much, much more, including, of course, our famous NCF mug. If you aren't able to become a member, then please help us by clicking this button and subscribing to our channel. It's completely free. Just remember to also click the bell icon so that you can get notifications when we post new videos. Thank you.